let's dive right in. What is DevSpaces? Um, so let me describe to you, um, what DevSpaces is. The fundamental problem that if you're a developer that you experience day in and day out, Stephen, if you can go on to the next slide, is that we as developers spend an inordinate amount of time around activities that are really not development work. There was a recent InfoWorld article that showed how much time we spend on tests, builds, setting up the development environment. And by the way, this is a very conservative estimate. Um, I think the Dilbert articles very subtly capture the nuances of the daily life of an IT worker. And I don't think I could have found a better strip to kind of show you, one of those scenes. So we do spend an insane amount of time working on our development environments, making sure that they are working for all the dependencies that we have in our products. And as we move on to, newer languages, add new dependencies, new API, new environments, whether it be cloud or on premise or wherever else, it just gets more and more complex. And making sure that every development environment is clean, every development environment, just works can take a lot of time and a lot of effort. So let's just deep dive into understanding what the problem really is. So, Stephen, if you can go on to the next slide, please. Um, the real problem is that your development environment is not the same as production. And likewise, all of us have our laptops or iPads or whatever we use to develop, and they vary from Windows boxes or to Macs to Linux boxes to different flavors of the OS, different flavors of other environment variables, different builds of dependencies, whether that be your libraries for your core product to other compilers to whatever other dependencies you might have for your product. They're just different, and every developer has a unique setup, and you just have to hope and pray that what you build on your local machine, as and when you deploy it into production, just continues to work. Now, there are a whole lot of people out there who are doing a ton of work to make sure that everything continues to be beautifully compatible, everything works really well, but it's fundamentally different. And I don't know how many edge cases you can keep chasing, trying to make sure that everything works. The "it works on my machine" syndrome is very, very real. And I don't know of a single developer who's been around for even a reasonable amount of time who hasn't either made that excuse or heard that excuse. I have certainly heard this at least 1,000 times in the few decades that I've been around. Also, we spend a lot of time manually building up all of these dev environments. It's just, insanely hard. And I'm shocked to think that it's 2022 and we still do this all manually. Given all the advancements in AI and machine learning and the cloud and all of that stuff, to think that we just still manually build all these dev environments, and there's so much um, tribal knowledge around how your product works and how to set up your dev machine. It's just shocking that we continue to do this. And of course, before you start coding, there's this entire dance that you have to do, which is configure your machine, run the build, test it before you even start coding, then hope that once the command which you have to run to get everything started with the backend server, the front end application, browser, make sure the ports are open. After you've done all that dance, that's when you can literally start coding. So it is a cumbersome task. And for 2022, for this day and age, we really need to rethink this particular problem. If you can go to the next slide, Stephen. I promise I'm not going to be talking very much through slides. So just a few more to highlight what we're getting to, and we'll spend most of our time doing live demos. So the solution really is DevSpaces that we built for ourselves. For some context, we have over 200 different enterprise-grade products that we own and run, and we have thousands of developers across 130 plus countries that work on our code bases. And the real problem that we had was that we could never get someone started fast enough on any of our products. So we really wanted a development environment that we could define as code in a simple manner. We wanted automated provisioning of these dev environments where you didn't have to worry about what infrastructure people were running. In a lot of places where our developers are working, internet connectivity is a limitation. There are a lot of other, constraints which prevent, these enterprise environments to be downloaded. I mean, some of our enterprise environments span hundreds of repositories where you would literally need to download something to the tune of 150 to 300 gigs, somewhere in that range, before you can even stand up something. And for that, you need insanely powerful beastie machines, which you have to keep upgrading. Ephemeral dev environments, because I don't know of a single developer who can claim that their dev environment is absolutely pristine. Mine gets messed up in no time at all. I cringe every time I have to install something locally. Whether it's a dependency on my Mac, which does not work with Python or Ruby, and I have to locally compile it before it works. All of those we wanted to solve. And of course, just get developers started in a matter of a few minutes. Like, why should it take someone a month before they can start working on a bug fix or a feature that needs to be added to the code base? If you can just quickly move on to the next slide, Stephen. This again goes back to our overall theme that we have in DevGraph, which is we are trying to make AWS easy for everyone. And with DevSpaces, we are coming with the idea of making development on AWS really easy. We started off, of course, with our own use case, but we are really excited to bring this to our customers because I think everyone could benefit from having simpler, clean dev environments to get started with. So with that, I would love to move on to the next slide, which is the reality is that most organizations are now starting to see the move away from their local machine. And to be honest, the pandemic was a big contributor to that. As people started going remote, as infrastructure, making sure that remote infrastructure was available just the same way as it was in your office, where you probably had your data center or you probably had your servers running right in the room next to you where you sat. Remote really pushed everyone to rethink what it means to do development and to do development more productively, more efficiently. And there was a recent post on, DX Tips, which is actually really, really interesting. And this is a really, really long thread. You guys should take some time to go through it. But it really gives you a sense for how many organizations are completely rethinking doing local development and instead looking at development being done in the cloud. If you can go on to the next slide, here are just some examples that we pulled up from the same article as well as the Twitter feed. GitHub, Google, Shopify, Tesla, Palantir, Facebook, they've all completely moved to remote development. And they've built their own systems. They've built, a whole lot of infrastructure to enable this for their entire workforce because they truly see the benefits of doing this. When your employees want to be remote, when you want to access infrastructure without being without being held hostage by your own local machine, your remoteness to wherever all your resources are sitting. And we see the world the same way. We see the world moving to this setup where everything is moving to remote, and so should your development environment. And DevSpaces, you might ask the question, those are all really big names. And while these big names really push the boundaries or the edge of where computing or regular software development moves, the reality is that today we are in a world where something like DevSpaces, which is a remote development environment, is also absolutely perfect for small teams. We have teams that are single person or single IC kind of teams where I myself code almost every other day. I use DevSpaces to write up code for a bunch of automation, to 2-member teams, to 5-member teams, to very, very large organizations. So DevSpaces fits every role, and it fundamentally addresses the problems that I described earlier.